Okay, I'm really excited about this Daily Cyber. What I'm going to be covering is preparing for an interview with Scott Schober, just talking about some of his resources, some of his books, and sharing that with you as I prepare for my interview with him next week or so. Also, I'm going to be talking about the 5 A's of cybersecurity. So let's heck at it. Okay, so I'm really excited about this podcast. I wanted to talk about a few things. Like I said, the potential or upcoming interview with Scott Schober, the 5 A's of cybersecurity, and just kind of catch you up on what I've been working on, what's going on with myself. So my name is Brandon Krieger. I'm a cybersecurity professional in the industry. I'm constantly looking for what I consider the truth of cybersecurity, the ins and outs of what does it all mean. Right, from a career to consulting to working in the industry, from technology, from solutions. I love to learn. I love to kind of ask, good quality questions from experts out there and just really understand and learn about cybersecurity, and then take that information and be able to help people in the industry, and businesses, companies, people, you name it. And one of the things I advise people, and as I talk to them, is you're really trying to protect people, places, and things. Right, and I'm really excited to share the knowledge that I have with people that I meet and people that are needing my help with technology and solutions, or people that I meet that I can refer them to. So that's a little bit about me. I'm really excited about doing this podcast and these podcasts to help and share. So let me first talk about these 2 books. First book I received from Scott Schober is Hacked Again. It can happen to anyone, even a cybersecurity expert. So this is his first book that I received. I reviewed it. I didn't go through it thoroughly, as I'm going to do now, preparing for the interview with him. I'm going to go back through it this week and potentially just kind of fly through it and make some notes. So this is a really good book in the sense of you really want to kind of see what to know about being breached and how even a cybersecurity expert deals with it. The next book that I just received from Scott looks like he co-authored with Craig Schober. It's Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business. Solve the security puzzle for your business and home. So here's the other book. I know if you're watching this on video, you'll see it. If you're just listening to this on podcast, I'll actually have the links to these books in the description, so you guys can go and grab these books for your resources and just be able to read them. Now, if you decide to go and pick up these books and read them and you have questions, please comment below. Send me your questions. So I'll keep them in my show notes so that when I interview Scott, I can ask your questions as well. So as you're kind of coming up with your own questions of like, well, what about this and why need you do that? Let me know. I'll ask him, as many questions as I receive, just to kind of give you guys some insight of how Scott thinks and what would he do. So what's been going on with me? So after Ted's interview, I had a little bit of technical issues when it comes to my system, and it took me a little bit longer to edit the last podcast. I was hoping to use Zoom as my recording platform, and what I found out is Zoom.us, and I was hoping to use that as my audio and video recording for people that are remote. And what I ran into a problem is that the audio and video started to drift. So they weren't in sync or in line. So what happened was it almost looked like one of those old martial arts movies where the mouth was moving, but the dub of the voiceover was off sync. So it was like that. I wasn't really happy with that myself. So it came out more of as an audio podcast for the people that listen to and watched on YouTube. So I'm working on trying to find a better solution that's going to work so I can, provide a better experience for people that are potentially even watching these, and I'm interviewing people that are remote. So that's kind of what was going on with me last week and why I wasn't able to do too many podcasts on my own, because I was trying to troubleshoot that and I was running to challenges and issues. So let's talk about the 5 A's of cybersecurity. All right. These are very important to know because we know as the CIA, confidentiality, integrity and availability are so important to understand for planning and understanding the concepts of security, so that you put these in place as you're thinking about your protocols, your solutions, even writing your policies and procedures. How does it provide confidentiality? How does it keep everything, the integrity of everything, that you're working on, what's in that document, right? And the availability, making sure that the business is able to run, that it doesn't shut everything down, right? Because security has to serve the business and has to protect it, but it has to make sure the business is still running. All right. So now when we look at like the 5 A's, which is accountability, authentication, authorization, and then it's accounting and assurance. So those are the 5. So accountability. My definition of accountability is the process of tracing actions to the source. Authentication is the positive identification of a person or system who is seeking access to information or to a system. Authorization is granting users or systems a predetermined level of access to resources. Accounting is the logging of access, use of information and resources. Assurance is the process we use to develop confidence that our security measures are working and as intended. So going back over those, look, accountability, right, is the process in tracing the action of the source. Now, why is this important? It's important to have accountability so that we know in our logs and as we're doing actions, we have some sort of accountability of transactional, work, that we know that, Brandon opened up that document, at what date, what time, and I did these edits. We need to know that what's going on, because if someone compromises a system and it's off hours, or they use my account, and I'll use this as a great scenario. If someone breaches my account and they go in and they log in at 2 a.m. in the morning and they start to download files, they start to take lots of data and maybe even corrupt it, edit it, whatever that may be, having the accountability and going back through the logs, people can say, is that Brandon? Does he normally log in, or is he working from 9 to 5? 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, he's doing that. And for some reason on Thursday night, he's in at 2 a.m. Did he swipe his card? Did he get into the building? Is he working on remote access? Did he log in remotely through his VPN access and all? Looking at all these logging and authentication methods that I would use from the company and the business, if they're seeing that is not my regular habit, and they're saying that I went in through a different way, now they're going to say, okay, hold on, there's a compromise going on, there's a breach. So lock down Brandon's account, change the password. Now we have to do a forensics investigation and find out what actually has been breached and what's been done. But now we know through accountability, right, we can look at what exactly potentially could have happened and how we can trace it back. So then you look at authentication, and that's what brings me back to what I was just saying about, the authorization of my account. So the authentication is the positive identification of a person or system who is seeking access to information or to a system. So as people are trying to breach or compromise systems, what they're trying to do is maybe brute force, phishing attacks, whatever that may be, to get, say, and I'll use this example, my credentials to be able to log into the system. And say I have high credentials. I have admin type credentials to a system, to an area of the network, whatever that may be. Well, now if they can breach my account, now they get access, right? And if they get access to my account or to the systems or both, now they can start going through and maybe doing reconnaissances and looking at the infrastructure or whatever that may be. So these security measures are to make sure that people don't have access or not able to gain access to my account. So that's why we have, two-factor authentication, and even now a step up is true passwordless decentralized authentication, right? Stepping up levels of authentication to make sure that someone can't just use my password and get in. And this is why we have password policies, to make sure that the passwords are changed on a regular basis. They're, and I'm going to say this, that they're complex, but again, a lot of people in the industry, be it the regular users or even IT people, sometimes don't follow those policies in the sense of making them as complex as possible, because they have so many passwords. They just want to get in. They want to make it accessible. Now, I'm not saying all, but I've seen, scenarios where the password is, easy to profile. Right? And I've talked to people that do penetration testing, and they're able to breach not just employees' passwords and the regular users, but even admin passwords that they shouldn't be able to do. So authentication is so important to understand, have that understanding of, as when you're looking at security systems, security protocols, is looking at the accountability, looking at the authentication, and making sure they're in place, and you being diligent as a security professional, they have to meet a certain standard that you set, right? And stick with that. Like, you got to be diligent on that with the business to make sure that they're secure, because if they get breached, it's a whole different scenario. So that's why it's important to look at authentication. Authorization. Authorization is granting users or systems a predetermined level of access to resources. So what that means is that, like I said, if I log in with my account, my access might be just general user, right? So I have access to my system, I have access to certain applications, I have access to the network, maybe a shared drive, and that's only my access. Right. And then what happens is, through my authorization, I've been granted through permissions, and I've been granted through groups or whatever that may be. And I'll use Active Directory as an example. Right. Normally you put people into groups, and groups into permission groups that have certain rights. So say I'm in IT and they just want me as a help desk agent. Well, that help desk agent might only have certain rights. But now I move up in positions, and now my authorization needs to be increased to, say, an admin of a certain group. Although, I'm just thinking about something too, privilege escalation and as well as privilege leak when you have two different accounts. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I just bring that up because it's coming up to my mind. But for example, say now with my help desk, I have a help desk account and I move up to another position where I have admin rights to a certain group, where I have to maybe install applications, and I need local admin rights to install software, install hardware, whatever that may be. So you can see privileges can change. So with those two privileges, I might be in part of two different groups. Well, we have to make sure that there's no issue of privileges leaking over from one access to another account. So there's a lot of auditing that needs to be done when it comes to authentication, to making sure that if I move positions, I don't have privilege escalation into one account that I shouldn't have access to. So this is why it's important to understand authorization, and privileges, and what access I need for my role inside and out. So that's why it's kind of important to understand, authentication for, our purposes of cybersecurity. Accounting is the logging of access and use of information resources. Again, comes back into logging, right? Making sure that we have ways to log someone accessing their account, to accessing certain data points, network points, from accessing a Wi-Fi, maybe they're connecting through, their smartphone to laptop. All these things need to have some sort of accounting that we can log and we can track. So it's so important when it comes to security, in my opinion, is that these things are done, because we want to make sure that we understand who has the authorization to have access to people, places, and things, right, and who doesn't. Right? And if we don't have accounting on that and logging, then we could just have like this open door policy where anyone can log in, anyone can come in. So accounting is so important in being able to log this. Then assurance. Assurance is the process we use to develop confidence that our security measures are working as intended. So this is when you do auditing. You want to make sure that, and here's something that, us security professionals hear a lot and work with, is false positives, false negatives, right? And making sure that what is actually the system doing? Is it, a unified threat management tool? Is it, a SIM, that's collecting all this information and off different types of tools and systems that we have in place, and making sure those systems are working properly through SIMs and logging and auditing to make sure that they're protecting the infrastructure and the company as they're supposed to. This goes for antivirus, anti-malware, cloud security, you name it. So we have to have these systems in place through the 5A protocols and process that we know to make sure that when we're auditing everything, everything's working, as it should be. And we're providing the company and the business and the shareholders and our clients the assurance that, yes, we've set up these security protocols, we've set up these security systems, and they're working as they should be. So again, going back over the 5A's: accountability, authentication, authorization, accounting, and assurance. It's so important to know these ones, especially as you're going through your security journey, is to remember them, because as you're talking about security, as you're going through this, you want to make sure you understand like CIA, the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, as well as the 5A's, so that you're checking off certain baselines for yourself, that your protocols, your systems, your solutions are meeting a certain standard for you. Now, don't get me wrong. This is just personally for you to understand. There's different frameworks like NIST that you would follow to make sure that you have a checklist of what you're going through. And I'll talk about it in future videos or future podcasts. But it's so important for you to kind of get this foundation and base and know this inside and out. And this is why I'm talking about, is because as I learn, as I study, as I go through, courses and certifications and all that, these are the things that are coming up for me that I'm like, you know what? These are so important. They're essential to keep in your mind as you're consulting or advising on cybersecurity solutions, because companies need to know this. Companies need to know why. Why are you doing this? What's the relevance? What's the importance of this? And going back to them being able to explain, this is why we're doing it, and these are the areas we want to cover and make sure that the business is protected. It's so important to give that information, provide that. So that's it for today's podcast. I just want to leave it at that. Like I said, I'm really excited about hearing your feedback, what you guys think. If you're enjoying the podcast, depending on where you're listening to it or watching it, hit like, subscribe, share it out to your colleagues and friends. I want to make sure this gets to as many people as possible, and just so we can share this information and help educate more and more people on cybersecurity. So I'd like to thank you for listening to this podcast, and just don't forget, software is hackable, being connected is vulnerable. I'll see you next podcast.